All right.
Quite the opposite. I'm thinking it's going to be fun to speak to such a happy group.
Yeah, we warmed up the crowd for you.
Kind of like the Smurfs.
Okay. All right, everybody. And everybody mute yourselves, please. And we will proceed to get on with the festivities. I'm going to continue to admit people as we go along. But just a few announcements. Thanks, everybody, for joining us this evening. We have a wonderful program for you. I'd just like to reiterate what Laura was saying about from the Friends of the OB Library. The new plan for the Ocean Beach Library may be available very soon, October 2nd or November or something. So we'll watch for that, and we'll try. She's doing sign language.
Yeah,
so
October 3rd or November 6th, the first Wednesday.
Okay, okay, thank you, Laura.
Yeah.
And then I would also like to mention that this is why I said October 2nd. On Saturday, October 2nd, the OB Town Council is having the annual pancake breakfast on the pier. And so $15 for adults, $8 for children. Go to obtowncouncil.org, and all the proceeds go to the Ocean Beach Food and Toy Drive. Okay, and then please visit our website, obhistory.org, to keep track of what Ocean Beach Historical Society is doing. And if you'd like to become a member, the membership form is also on our page. It's only $15 American, and it's certified, one of the few bargains left in this country. So please join us. And also we maintain an archive room at Water's Edge Church. And if you have anything that you think we might be interested in, old photographs, we've gotten a lot of interesting old newspapers from people recently, even family photos. If you don't know what to do with them, we might be interested. So keep us in mind. We are a fully nonprofit 501c3 organization, and we do have an archive on Ocean Beach history. Also, if you haven't checked out our YouTube channel yet, just go to YouTube and search for Ocean Beach Historical Society. We have a lot of stuff on there now. We have a lot of our programs, including postcards from the past that Johnny and I did about a month ago, and that is archived online, as will this program be pretty soon. And then I would like to call everybody's attention to Kitty's wonderful story about Warren Walker School, which is now in the Point Loma OB Monthly online in a newsstand near you, or possibly even in your mailbox. So splendid work, Kitty. It really came out well. So so check that out.
Oh, there it is. Look.
Oh, look at that. Hey, you guys are great. Look at that. I see everybody's reading it now. Very good. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Pat. And then next month on the 21st, we will have Bill Lawrence from the San Diego History Center with us, talking about, we think, resources available to the public and to researchers at the San Diego History Center. And that ought to be a lot of fun. Bill has been talking about joining us for a couple of years, and so we will be happy to have him with us next month. Okay. This evening, we're very pleased to have Nancy Carroll Carter with us again this evening. Nancy is an associate editor of California Garden Magazine, and she'll correct me if any of this is no longer accurate. She's also been a contributor to the Journal of San Diego History, Eden, and California Horticulture magazines. She's a retired professor of law at USD, so, you know, none of your shenanigans. And she is also one of the great experts on Kate Sessions and on the early days of Balboa Park. And that's what she will be speaking with us this evening about, the lost and found Balboa Park Gardens of Kate Sessions. And here's Nancy.
Thank you so much, Eric.
Thank you.
I'm going to share my screen so we can get started. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm truly honored to be invited back to an Ocean Beach Historical Society meeting. And I'm so delighted that you're interested in more information about Kate Sessions. The core of this presentation will be 3 stories of specialty gardens in Balboa Park. And these gardens have Kate Sessions' green fingerprints all over them, although her connection to the gardens is not very well known. The 3 gardens have rocky histories, giving rise to my reference to them as lost and found places in our park. As this opening image suggests, one of the gardens is full of palms, one featured aloes and agaves, and one is a cactus garden. But I'd like to start with a review of some basic biographical information on Kate Sessions and her work as a nursery owner, horticulturalist, civic activist, as well as her involvement with Balboa Park. And this includes some facts and images we did not cover 2 years ago when I presented a program on Kate Sessions to your group. Kate Sessions was born in San Francisco in 1857. And when she was just a bit older than shown in this photograph, her family moved to Oakland, where her father farmed and raised horses. So Kate grew up riding her pony in the Oakland Hills, and from an early age, she loved collecting wildflowers and ferns. I love this photo of the 8-year-old Kate Sessions, and it tells us at least 2 things. First, that her earnest, straightforward way of looking at the world was acquired at an early age. And second, that her family was relatively well off financially. This is just one of many professional photographs taken during her childhood, when studio photography was still relatively new and something of a luxury product. Here's the entire Sessions family at their Oakland home: Kate, Harriet, Josiah, and her only sibling, a younger brother, Frank. This photograph is undated, but I think there's a good chance that it was taken in June of 1881 on the occasion of Kate Sessions' graduation from the University of California at Berkeley. An important thing to notice in this picture is that flower-filled and richly planted garden. Kate always said that she grew up in a garden because her mother was a plant lover. Kate had also attended a San Francisco business college before going to university, but she was unable to find work in her chosen fields of banking or chemistry, as at that time, very few women were hired in those fields, so she defaulted to teaching in the Oakland school system. And it was a teaching job that brought San Diego in 1884. San Diego built its first secondary school just 2 years before Sessions was hired as an associate principal and mathematics teacher. She saw this administrative level job as a good reason to leave her family and move on her own to San Diego, a rather adventurous decision for a young woman in the Victorian era. And here she is under that green arrow, I think looking rather miserable in her fashionable attire. She was pushed out of her administrative post when a male applicant came along, and for a while, all the teachers at Rush School were laid off due to lack of money to pay them. Meanwhile, she had met an older couple in San Diego who ran a nursery and florist business, and they were looking for help. Kate Sessions willingly left behind her short teaching career to go into the nursery and florist business. Here's the Flora Shop she ran in downtown San Diego on 5th Avenue. Sessions and her partners were growing all the flowers and plants for the Flora Shop over on the almost uninhabited Coronado Island. She regularly took the ferry back and forth to work in the flower fields and collect cut flowers for the shop. Here's a document showing Coronado land sales to K.O. Sessions and S.G. Blaisdell. The Blaisdells were the partners who brought her into the nursery and florist business. But their arrangement did not last very long, and when the partnership ended amicably, Kate Sessions had her start. in the business that she would pursue for the next 55 years. She had her small downtown Flora Shop and Coronado land for growing her stock. However, Coronado was about to undergo a complete change. When it was built in 1888, the glamorous Del Coronado Hotel started a boom in nearby land values. The fields that Sessions was using as her growing grounds were near the ferry landing and soared in value. However, before selling her land, Sessions needed a new place to grow flowers and expand her plant nursery. Possibly with the encouragement from some city leaders, she hit upon the idea of leasing some of the vast 1,400 acres of the public park that had been created 20 years earlier, but had not been developed or improved. This was, of course, Balboa Park, although it did not get that name until 1910. Here's a part of the actual petition that Kate Sessions presented to the City Council, requesting a lease of park land. The entire original petition is at the San Diego City Clerk's archive. The first line says, "I offer my services to establish on a small portion of the city park with water privileges an experimental nursery and garden." Her petition goes on to suggest that her lease payments be made in the form of tree planting in the park and the furnishing of trees to the city. So this petition was the basis of a private-public agreement that brought Kate Sessions into early park development and set up the first sustained tree planting program in Balboa Park. Her lease ran for 10 years, meaning that Sessions added at least 1,000 new trees to the park, but she often planted more than required. We don't have an exact count. The green dot on this old map of San Diego and City Park shows the area where Sessions used 32 acres of park land from 1892 to 1903. This is at the corner of 6th Avenue and Upas Street near Marston House. The photograph of Cabrillo Canyon shows the undeveloped park with its coastal chaparral. The trail on this photo is now the route of Highway 163 through our park. After winter rains, the natural vegetation of Balboa Park can turn green. But for many people, this terrain was not the way a public park was supposed to look. In San Diego in those early days, there was talk of selling off the useless park land. But Kate Sessions intended to show San Diego that the barren lands of the park could be cultivated and beautified. That was part of the experimental aspect of her time in the park. Within a few months of taking up her lease, Sessions sent a bouquet of roses to the City Council, explaining that they had been grown on City Park land. This photo shows her rose fields in bloom. Her nursery acted as a demonstration garden, showing that beautiful things could be grown in the park. Hundreds of people would visit her blooming roses, chrysanthemums, and other flowering plants throughout the year. As her lease was coming to an end, Sessions gradually purchased land in the Mission Hills area, which had only a handful of residents. That is where she moved her nursery when she left the park. By 1903, she was operating her Mission Hills nursery, but found that it was so far removed from residential areas and downtown that she needed to buy a car. She became one of the first women in San Diego to purchase an automobile. I do doubt that Kate's 1902 Maxwell was as fancy as the one shown here, but this at least gives you the idea. Sessions stayed in Mission Hills for more than 20 years, and during that time ramped up the garden design side of her business. It was very fashionable to have a garden planned by Kate Sessions. But as it happened in Coronado, the real estate market again caught up with her. Mission Hills was being subdivided and developed. Her land was becoming much too valuable to use as growing grounds. Kate Sessions began buying land in the undeveloped Pacific Beach area, sometimes with her brother Frank. By 1926, Sessions had moved out of Mission Hills and was operating her nursery business in its final location. She ran the K.O. Sessions Pacific Beach Nursery until her death in 1940. The yellow-orange blossoms pictured here are from one of the trees that Sessions introduced to San Diego, the Tipo tipuano tree, native to Bolivia. Sessions planted one of these trees outside her sales office, and it is still growing today, having been saved from destruction when the streets were widened. You can see it at the corner of Garnett and Pico Streets, and under the tree find the state historical marker erected on the site of her Pacific Beach nursery. In 1939, just months before she died, Kate Sessions received a prestigious International Horticulture Prize, the Meyer Medal. It was created in honor of the gentleman on the right, the intrepid plant hunter, Frank N. Meyer, who died on his 4th expedition to China. He brought many important crop plants like soybeans and winter wheat to the United States, but the import we all know best is the Meyer lemon. The award of this medal was a capstone on Sessions' life work, and it says volumes about her professional reputation in the larger world of horticulture. She was the first woman to receive a Meyer Medal, and it was many, many years before another was awarded to a woman. Well, this review of Kate Sessions' life would be incomplete without mentioning her civic activism and conservation work. She cared about her community and the natural world around her. She joined with others in the San Diego Floral Association in the campaign that saved the beautiful stand of native oaks, now protected in the El Monte Oaks County Park. And some San Diego leaders hatched a scheme to build a new highway through the densest stand of coastal torrey pines. Kate Sessions wrote long editorials and lobbied for a different route, eventually seeing the road plan change to spare the trees. Sessions revered the natural beauty of wildflowers from the time of her childhood, and she was a tireless advocate for their appreciation and preservation. She often joined in group tours to view wildflowers, helping to identify plants and explaining to others the importance of habitat preservation. And here is an example of a native plant that Kate Sessions brought into cultivation, learning how to propagate it and bringing it into the nursery trade. She did that with several native plants. Here are some of the last photographs of Kate Sessions. On the right, she's standing on the porch of the beautiful home she built in Pacific Beach, holding on to what probably is a very special begonia. And on the left, we see an almost smile from her. In December 1939, Kate Sessions broke her hip while watering her garden. She never left the hospital and died of pneumonia in 1940. Kate Sessions has been known since the 1930s as the mother of Balboa Park. But what was her actual role in Balboa Park development? There's still a lot of misinformation on this point. We talked about how Kate Sessions leased 32 acres of the undeveloped park in 1892. The lease arrangement continued for 10 years, and Sessions planted hundreds of trees in the park over that time. When Kate Sessions left the park to establish her Mission Hills nursery after 1902, she never again had any official control of Balboa Park land or any official role in landscaping the park. She was not a landscape architect who developed the whole park, as you can read in some inaccurate sources. But Kate Sessions was a highly respected voice in San Diego, and she was a lifelong advocate for Balboa Park. Her ideas carried a lot of weight, and she did influence park development. This explains her connection with the three specialty gardens we're going to explore. The once magnificent Kate O. Sessions Aloe and Agave Garden is lost. It has been gone for 50 years. A lot of confusion surrounds this former Balboa Park garden. It has been mixed up with the desert garden that we have today, and also with the Cactus Garden. Even the exact location of this garden was unclear. I've had a lot of fun over the past pandemic months doing research to finally unravel the full story of this garden and its Balboa Park location. The story of the garden begins in 1931, when Sessions suffered a serious illness. The exact nature of her ailment remains undescribed, but she was hospitalized and had surgery. She certainly looks frail and ill in this photograph. As the news of her condition spread, San Diego panicked. Sessions was 74 years old, and it appeared that she might be on her deathbed. Had this wonderful citizen received in life the accolades that would surely be heaped upon her in death? Had San Diego done enough to celebrate and reward the great Kate Sessions? As these questions were bubbling around town, plans were quickly made for a large community dinner to be held in Sessions' honor as soon as she was well enough. A lot of speeches would be made, and she would be praised. When Kate Sessions got wind of this plan, she immediately vetoed it. She suggested instead that an aloe and agave garden be built in Balboa Park. This is what would make her happy. And she said it would be a notable enhancement of the park, bringing in tourists, just like the desert garden at the Huntington Estate in San Marino. The public was told about the plan in a splashy newspaper feature in March 1932. This collage of Kate Sessions' pictures, here's her home in Pacific Beach, this is her garden, this is that first Flora Shop. This is Kate shortly before she moved to San Diego, and this photograph was taken about 1936. So this collage of pictures dominated the front page of the Home and Garden section, and the following pages carried an in-depth article on Sessions' life and an announcement of the new Aloe and Agave garden. And it also reported that she was recovering her health. The San Diego Floral Association, an organization still going strong today, and which Kate Sessions had helped to found in 1907, took up the challenge of creating the new Aloe and Agave garden. Mrs. Greer, a longtime president of the Floral Association, was a dynamo, and she knew how to get things done. In modern times, she would probably be the CEO of a major corporation. Chauncey Jerebeck was active in the Floral Association. He loved and respected Kate Sessions, and he was the Balboa Park horticulturalist who led the practical planting work in the Aloe and Agave garden. He also documented the garden, maintaining a meticulous record of all the plants and researching species needed to complete the collection. Of course, the first step was getting permission to establish a new garden within Balboa Park. John Morley was superintendent of parks and had known and worked with Sessions since his 1911 San Diego arrival. He helped win city approval and assigned a plot of park land for the new garden. Sessions and Jerebeck sought contributions of plants and expert advice. A cameo role was played by William Hertrich, another pal of Kate Sessions and the creator of the gardens at the Huntington Estate. He donated many rare plants, provided advice on the layout. Other donations came from all over San Diego, California, and the Southwest. Sessions contributed her entire large personal collection of aloes and agaves. I mentioned the confusion that has always surrounded the history of this garden. There are very few photographs or descriptions of it. One of the open questions was exactly where the garden was located. In my recent research, I was thrilled to find an aerial photograph from 1936 that answers that question. This is the aloe and agave garden. And on this one long side, it was 340 feet long. It was a large garden. It was on sloping ground, and there were these twin roads that ran on each side of the garden, and they combined and went on down into Florida Canyon. So the zoo is off in this direction. The large Morton Bay fig tree is off in this direction. This would be north, going this way. The garden was always described as being on the east side of Park Boulevard. And in this photograph, it is indeed on the east side of Park Boulevard. Here is Park Boulevard. However, Park Boulevard was realigned when it was rebuilt in 1966 as a 4-lane thoroughfare. Until this research, I did not know just how far Park Boulevard was moved. But in this illustration, we can see that with the relocation of Park Boulevard, the aloe and agave was no longer on the east side of the street, completely on its west side. No wonder the garden location information was always confusing. So today, the desert garden is over in this area. By 1934, the garden was becoming well established. Jerebeck and Sessions were still aggressively seeking specific plants to fill out the aloe and agave collection. On March 23, 1935, the garden was presented by the Floral Association to the city of San Diego. It was dedicated and officially named the Kate O. Sessions Aloe and Agave Garden. And here she is sitting on that stone bench that had been built in the garden. After this dedication, the aloe and agave garden pretty much drops out of the news and other written sources. There was one newspaper article in 1938 when an agave attenuata shot up its spectacular bloom. This plant is very common in San Diego now, but it was new and unusual in the 1930s. Kate Sessions claimed that the one in the aloe and agave garden was the very first to ever bloom in San Diego. The few stories written about the garden sadly record neglect and decline. But despite inadequate maintenance, some sturdy aloe and agave plants persisted in the garden for decades, proving Kate Sessions' point that these are hardy and useful plants for San Diego. But a master plan for Balboa Park in 1960 doomed the garden. Bartholomew Plan described the aloe and agave garden as unmaintained and called for its abandonment. The planners suggested that any worthy plants be moved to the Cactus Garden. In 1971, the Kate O. Sessions Aloe and Agave Garden was completely destroyed when the land upon which it stood was paved over to create the Spanish Village parking lot. We do not know if any of the aloe and agave plants were saved or relocated, or if they were unceremoniously plowed under by a bulldozer. We do know that one of the most botanically important specialty gardens and one of the best documented plant collections ever established in Balboa Park was neglected to death. And we also know that a heartfelt community tribute to Kate Sessions lost out to the mounting pressure of the automobile and decisions about land use in Balboa Park. A parking lot was deemed more important than the historic garden it replaced. Another garden that Kate Sessions brought to Balboa Park is the Cactus Garden. And like the Aloe and Agave garden, it was magnificent when created, then suffered decades of neglect and vandalism. I almost called it a lost garden because it was forgotten and neglected for so many years. But I think we can now say that it has been found because of a recent revitalization project that we'll discuss. Kate Sessions lobbied and cajoled for many years before she saw the realization of her dream of a world-class garden in Balboa Park. She's on the record as first mentioning the idea in 1899, and then over the years, she kept plugging the idea in her articles and talks. And here are some of the many times that she mentioned the idea of San Diego creating a world-class cactus center in Balboa Park. When it was announced in 1934 that Balboa Park would host the California Pacific International Exposition, Kate Sessions saw a chance, and she turned up the heat. It took a lot of persuasion, but she did win support for a new cactus garden to be part of the exposition. To create the garden, Kate was once again working with good friends Morley and Jerebeck, but the new player was Richard Requa, who was the architect in charge of the 1935 exposition. He apparently was a tough sell, but once the garden was approved and assigned a location, he was not closely involved. The 1935 exposition was thrown together in record time, and Requa was very busy with other projects. This Balboa Park map shows the additional buildings added by the 1935 exposition in what is called the Palisades area of Balboa Park. To orient you, I've marked the bridge and the Organ Pavilion. And today, this is the Air and Space Museum, and this is the Automobile Museum and the Municipal Gym across the way. But these were all new for the 1935 exposition. The new Cactus Garden was given land on the side of Cabrillo Canyon behind today's Balboa Park Club. This is the first official rendering of the Cactus Garden on a Balboa Park map. And here's a nice aerial shot of the Palisades area, really nice shot of the big plazas that were built for the exposition. And here's the Cactus Garden showing up very nicely because it was dressed with white sand. And here's a close-up of that garden. And finally, a ground level photo, just one small part of the garden after Chauncey Jerebeck had gotten it planted. So, after 36 years of advocacy, Kate Sessions did get to see and savor a magnificent cactus garden in Balboa Park. It was filled with donations, including Kate Sessions' own collection, and gifts from cactus growers across the state and as far away as Texas and Oklahoma. The most significant donation came from the Federated Garden Clubs of Arizona. Working with the University of Arizona, they shipped an amazing 15 tons of cactus and desert plants to San Diego. And they even provided a university employee as the expert to help plant the Arizona donations, including 20 giant saguaros. Exposition postcards featured the exotic garden, and the exposition guidebook also had information about visiting the cactus garden. And it garnered some local press coverage. The Cactus Garden was recognized as one of the top 3 permanent landscape improvements to the park that resulted from the exposition. But like the Aloe and Agave garden, the Cactus Garden generated very little long-term interest. Almost nothing was written about the garden for decades. It was poorly maintained and vandalized over many years. The master planners for the park did, however, think the garden was worth saving, and in 1960 recommended that it be better protected and that it receive notable plants from the doomed Aloe and Agave garden. A recent intervention by the Balboa Park Conservancy has been the salvation of the Cactus Garden. Much of the work in the garden was made possible by a very generous private donation. The work is ongoing, but the Cactus Garden is in better condition today than it has been in many years. The Conservancy is rolling out its program of new park signage this year. There's a plan to provide better directional signs so that visitors can find this somewhat hidden cactus garden, which over the years has been called the Old Cactus Garden, the Cabrillo Cactus Garden, or the 1935 Cactus Garden. A proposal was made several months ago to formally rename the garden after Kate Sessions. Renaming anything in Balboa Park is complicated, but I'm thrilled to report that we will soon be seeing signs that for the first time acknowledge the connection between this garden and Kate Sessions. Meanwhile, the rehabilitated Cactus Garden is being rediscovered and enjoying a new popularity for photo shoots. Well, the oldest Balboa Park garden directly connected with Sessions is a collection of San Jose Hesper palms dating to 1914. This plantation of palms has never been recognized as a garden of Balboa Park. It is not on any park map. Few people know that these palms are closely connected to Kate Sessions, and that she is, in fact, responsible for this mass planting. That is why I call this collection of palms a lost Kate Sessions garden. Almost no one knows about it. The history of this garden begins in 1902, when Kate Sessions joined botanist T.S. Brandishi on a plant hunting expedition to the tip of Baja California. The explorers boarded a coastal steamship in Ensenada for the 4-day trip to San Jose del Cabo. They then rode mules for 3 days to reach a mountainous area where a special palm was growing. This palm was believed to be new to science, meaning that it was not botanically classified or named. The palm had never been imported into the United States. In the right-hand photo, T.S. Brandishi is sitting under a tree in Baja. On the left is his wife, Dr. Catherine Brandishi. The Brandishis were two of the most respected botanists of the late 1800s, and they were definitely the nation's most renowned botanical couple. When they moved to San Diego in 1894, they, of course, became friends with Kate Sessions. From the Mexico expedition, Kate Sessions returned to San Diego with small palms and bags of palm seed. Then, on her growing grounds near Stevens and Lewis Street in Mission Hills, she propagated hundreds of the new palms, thereby growing this plant species for the first time in the United States. A grove of these small palms was later planted in Balboa Park. This is what Kate Sessions wrote about the trip and the planting of the San Jose Hesper palms. I dug from the field 5 small palms and brought them to San Diego. Later, a few thousand seeds were planted. In 1914, 325 were planted in Balboa Park, just outside the Rose Garden. Of these 325, the park bought 175 and I donated 150. The group was planted in honor of Mr. and Mrs. Brandishi. Well, it might be confusing for us today to read that the palms were planted near the Rose Garden. There's no large palm grove near the Balboa Park Rose Garden. But Sessions was referring to the first rose garden in the park, not the one that we know today. As you can tell from this old postcard, the first rose garden planted for the 1915 exposition was on the west side of the park. The Cabrillo Bridge helps us envision the location. The garden was near the Laurel Street entrance at the approximate site of today's bowling greens. And these palms were planted probably a little further to the north, and they ran all the way down the side of Cabrillo Canyon. In this contemporary photo, the palm plantation is clearly visible on the northeast side of the bowling greens. There is an assortment of palm species on view in this photograph, but Kate Sessions' San Jose Hesper palms dominate this 1914 plantation. Here's an aerial view taken from the Balboa Park tree inventory completed about 3 years ago. On the bottom left are the 2 square bowling greens, and each colored dot on this image represents a tree. The dark purple dots are San Jose Hesper palms. 188 were counted in this area. Here are some recent photographs of the San Jose Hesper palm grove in Balboa Park. This palm is still somewhat rare in the United States. It's similar to Washingtonia robusta, the Mexican fan palm. It is tall and has a very long life. Its slender trunk is one of its distinguishing features. It is possible to stand amid these tall San Jose Hesper palms and look over to the Kate Sessions statue at the park entrance. Yet, this is a forgotten and overlooked garden. Almost no one knows that there is a direct connection between the bronze woman at the park entrance and this one-of-a-kind palm garden. The garden is historically important because it represents the success of Kate Sessions' one and only plant hunting expedition, and it proclaims her talent as a propagator. The garden is unique in the world and holds the largest collection of San Jose Hesper palms in the United States. Therefore, I have proposed that this collection be recognized as the Sessions Brandishi San Jose Hesper Palm Grove. Interpretive signage should tell the garden's story and its connection to both Sessions and the famous Brandishis. Like every other garden of Balboa Park, this one should be included on maps and in guides. Well, I'd like to close this story with some additional information on the Brandishis, hoping that you'll be seeing their name in the park in the not too distant future. They were so important to the San Jose Hesper palm story. These remarkable botanists added a wealth of information on the plants of California and Mexico to the botanical record. They spent months of their lives hiking and camping in remote locations to study plants. Catherine Brandishi was once in a shipwreck off Baja, but managed to save her field notes and plant samples. She broke her leg once in the high Sierras and had to be packed out on a mule. T.S. Brandishi wandered in the heat and barrenness of Mexico for weeks at a time studying cactus. The Brandishis elevated West Coast botanical science with their exacting work and by publishing scores of scientific papers. The mere presence of the Brandishis brought distinction to San Diego, and their botanical expertise and connections in the plant world inspired Kate Sessions and others who knew them. The Brandishis created San Diego's first botanical garden, and they built the largest private herbarium in the United States. Here is the Brandishi House and Herbarium on First Avenue near Redwood Street. Take note of that tall chimney and the unusual roof configuration. It was on this barren piece of land that the Brandishis created San Diego's first botanical garden. And here's Catherine Brandishi working in that garden. You can see the house in the background. Sadly, there are no remains of this once magnificent and botanically important garden. But you can connect with this history the next time you're in Bankers Hill by visiting the Brandishi property and seeing the house where they lived. It is not a museum. You don't have to make a reservation. you will not see the Brandishi name mentioned, but their house is at the Self-Realization Center on First Avenue near Redwood Street. People are welcome to enter this area, and when you walk onto the grounds, you will see an Irving Gill building constructed for the Bishop School when the Bishop School had a campus on the former Brandishi property. And behind that is the Brandishi house. Here it is, recognizable by that tall chimney and roof configuration. Well, I hope you will all enjoy visiting this unsung historic site of the Brandishi's home and garden in Bankers Hill, as well as returning to Balboa Park to view the Cactus Garden and the San Jose Hesper palms with a new appreciation of their history and close connection to the life and work of Kate Sessions. Thank you for joining the program tonight, and I'm going to be very happy to take questions.
Yes.
Thank you, Nancy. That was wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That
Right.
was,
Right,
that,
Katie.
I got goosebumps. That was so incredible.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that was just,
Don't you have a question?
I don't have a question.
Oh, okay.
I had a question, but you answered it.
Okay.
Hey, Nancy, what happened to the Brandishis? Why did they leave San Diego?
Well, you know, they had lived up in the Bay Area, and they came down here, I think with the idea that they were getting him closer to his major work, because Mexico was actually where he did most of his work. But as they got older, they just wanted to find a way to settle in and you know, cut back on the field botany they were doing and just do research. So they struck a deal with the University of California and at Berkeley. And when they moved back up there just after the earthquake, after 1906, they donated their herbarium to the university. And their herbarium, I mentioned it was the largest private herbarium in the United States. It doubled the size of the university herbarium. And they spent the rest of their lives living in Berkeley and working at the herbarium, studying plants.
Oh.
And they did that until they died in the 20s.
Wow. If they'd stayed here, we would have known them better. But because they only had that short time, it's too bad that people don't know more. So I hope your sign goes up.
Well, you know, I just saw his name in some things I read about Balboa Park, but it doesn't come up a lot. But
Yeah.
he actually helped in the very early days of the park when the first landscape architect came out. Mr. Brandishi was also a civil engineer. That's what he had done for most of his life. He was trained at Yale. And so he actually helped the first landscape architect with the engineering of the first roads that were built in Balboa Park. And he also, you know, gave advice about planting and the horticulture that he knew about. But I did write an article about the Brandishis. So if you're really interested, you will find an article in the Journal of San Diego History. You could just Google them and it'll pop up. Because I had discovered them and their story was so interesting. So there is an article out there about them.
Thank you.
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
What was the palm tree that Father Junipero Serra brought up from Baja?
That was a date palm.
Okay, okay, gotcha. Thanks. Who else has questions?
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I was just going to say, I used to go to church at the SRF there on First Avenue, and it's such an interesting place. And most people drive right by or walk by and don't even know it's there.
Right.
But I think it maybe the talk you gave us a couple years ago, you mentioned something about that, and I found that fascinating that used to be a botanical garden in there. There's a funny place down below the SRF there, and you get to it on a different street, and it's called the Indoor Sports Club.
I know where you mean. I think that land used to belong. I think that was originally all part of the Brandishi property. I'm not positive about that.
I would think
they had quite a bit of acreage.
Probably, yeah. Anyway,
They did have a lot of rare trees growing there. And there are stories from the days when the bishop's school met there. The teachers would take the students out to study under the trees, and they also would give them botany lessons just from the plants that were left over from the Brandishis. And at least one national expert on palms, when he came to San Diego to study palms, Kate Sessions took him over there because she knew a certain palm species he was interested in was growing, had been grown by the Brandishis. And they arrived just as a bulldozer was about to knock that palm over.
wow.
But apparently he got his view of it that he needed for his research.
Good, great.
How did your fascination with Kate Sessions begin?
Well, when I first moved to San Diego, I did live in Mission Hills, and I am a gardener. So I discovered the Mission Hills Nursery. And hanging up on the wall was this giant poster of a woman who they said was the first owner of the nursery. So I just thought that was interesting. And so I just started reading about her. And I found her story so fascinating that I've just continued to do research on her. And there's always something more to learn.
Yeah, we're glad you did the research.
So Nancy, you want to talk about your current research and what you're working on that I know about?
Sure. This is also a very long-term project. So I would go back to 2014 when the San Diego Floral Association and our magazine, California Garden, we were wanting to start commemorating the centennial of the 1915 exposition, because from a horticultural point of view, the exposition completely transformed Balboa Park. And so we started doing some research and writing articles for the magazine. And I started finding out about who had actually landscaped the exposition, and his name is Paul Fein. He never really got very much credit for his work. But more and more, I'm absolutely convinced he was the major landscaper. He was a German immigrant to the United States who had trained in horticulture in Germany and had kind of bounced around for several years trying to find his niche. And he finally got this job at the exposition, and it was the perfect position for him. He could show his skills. He supervised these huge crews of people who were working in the park and had to learn about sourcing plants from not only all over the United States, but all over the world. And after the exposition, he moved up to Los Angeles and then eventually to Pasadena, and he became a very, very famous landscape architect. So during the 1920s, when they were building those huge estates with marvelous, fancy gardens, Paul Fein was one of the leading landscape architects. And he specialized in the Italian style. And in the 20s, California thought they had solved their water problem. And so one of his specialties was all of these water features. So he was the landscaper of the Doheny Estate, Greystone, which you may know about. It is a place you can visit in Los Angeles. At Greystone, he built a cascade that was tumbled down the hill for 80 feet. So he built artificial lakes, waterfalls, and so on. But anyway, he just has a very interesting story, and that's what I'm working on.
And you'll give us that talk next year, right?
Well, I'd be happy to. I would have to say, a lot of his more developed work happened up in Los Angeles, Pasadena, Santa Barbara, rather than here. Although he did landscape the Sweet House, if that rings a bell for anyone. That was a Richard Requa property, and it has always been admired for its garden. And that was one of his private jobs he did while he was here in San Diego.
I bet you could get 40 minutes out of just the park. 45 minutes of Balboa Park. I know you. You said you had 40 pages.
Well, that's my manuscript so far.
Wow.
Was
Okay.
was that park engineer that Mr. Brandishi assisted? Was his name Cook?
Absolutely. Good for you. And did you read my article about George Cook?
I did.
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
That was fascinating. That was fascinating. He was another interesting guy.
George Cook was the partner of Samuel Parsons Jr., who had been hired to do the landscape plan for Balboa Park in 1902. And when the plan was ready, at least the street plan was ready, the road plan and entrances and so on, he sent his partner, George Cook, out to San Diego. And that is indeed who Mr. Brandishi worked with.
Ah, very good.
Yeah.
I have a question. Nancy, is there any connection between Catherine Tingley and Kate Sessions? Because I know Catherine Tingley supposedly received all kinds of exotic plants when she originated her theosophy.
Well, I don't know too much about their relationship, but I do know that she paid Kate Sessions to design, and I assume plant an orchard over on the property. And I wouldn't be a bit surprised if Kate didn't provide some of the exotic plants.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there are Dracaena dragonias on the theosophical place right next to the original Spalding home that are quite old. They have to be, they're huge. And I wonder if there was any connection.
Well, as I say, I don't personally know about their their personal relationship. But obviously, Kate Sessions was a leading nursery owner here in town, and they were developing their grounds.
Yeah.
So one thinks there has to be. I do know that Kate Sessions was not a particularly religious person, so I don't think Kate would have had any connection with her in the spiritual sense.
When I was interviewing Chuck Curtis years ago, he gave me documents that in 1901, the Theosophist hired her to do a lot of the planning at where the natural park is now at Sunset Cliffs. And unfortunately, it was kind of before the water came in, and some of it died. And later, two other men came in. One became the top forestry guy in the United States. This was like 1905 to 1910. And they planted the eucalyptus trees, which made a wind block, and things did better. And by that time, they'd brought water in. And also, we went to a talk at the city, and one of the gals, historians working for the city, told us that the Sefton house was done by Kate Sessions, and she had a tea garden there. And then also a friend who lived at the Seftons, and we went there for a party. She had found out too that had been planted. And there's actually two Sefton houses, but they have a lot of Monterey cypress, and they had Torreys and a lot of the types of plants that she planted up in that section of Point Loma. So anyhow, I think she had quite a few ties to some of the wealthier people in Point Loma that she did their homes.
Is that interview you did with Chuck, is that available somewhere?
Part of it, I don't know if we talked about that part. We did this years ago, but I do have the paperwork that shows where they planted the trees in the park. And it says, and they had sections of Monterey and eucalyptus and that, and it's kind of hand done. It was a Xerox copy that Chuck Curtis gave me, but I do have that, and yeah, it's pretty neat. I could send it over to you sometime.
That's great.
Yeah, and it has the dates of that. So yeah. Anyhow, Chuck, he lived on the point, and he went to the Theosophist school. when he was 4 years old. And he got into horticulture a lot. And later he bought a property in Ramona, and he actually started Torrey pines that were from the seeds and starts from the Theosophis Torrey pines that he had up along his ridge. Unfortunately, the year or two right before he died, the drought came, and a lot of his Torreys, he told me, died off, unfortunately. But
No, that's too bad.
anyhow, but they were about, we went in, when we interviewed him, we went to his property, and they were about 25, 30 feet tall at that point, the Torrey pines he had on his property. And he also had another kind of pine, and yeah, he really loved that. And I think his childhood growing up on the Theosophis property, Loma Land, really inspired him. But anyhow, and I think her friendship, Kate Sessions' friendship with, you know, the Rosecroft Gardens and Robinson, you know, they did a lot of work together. So I'm sure they probably, you know, things on the peninsula, she was probably over there quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Anyhow.
Go ahead, Pat.
Nancy, you had mentioned one of the sites that Fein had worked at in San Diego, the Sweet House.
Yes.
And I'm not familiar with that. Could you just elaborate a little bit?
Well, it's in Bankers Hill. And
Okay.
it's a beautiful old house that was done by Richard Requa. And I think he was in a partnership with someone. I can't remember who the other architect was. But it is one of those houses that, you know, is just considered to be significant for its architecture. And it was given by the Sweet family to the San Diego Historical Society when the last family member passed away. Unfortunately, it was one of those things that the Historical Society was just not able to maintain it, and they eventually had to sell it off. It's in private ownership now, and the owners did a complete restoration of the garden, and Paul Fein had kept such meticulous records of everything he planted, and all of those records are in the Sweet family files at the Historical Center. So he was able to do a wonderful garden restoration, historical restoration.
Nice. Now, is there any kind of designation on that property?
Oh, I'm sure it does have a historical designation, although I'm trying to think about, it would have been built, I think it was 1913, I believe, was when it was built.
May I chime in here? This is Judith Swink.
Sure.
And I can confirm it has City of San Diego historic designation. It has the nice bronze plaque on the door, or, you know, near the front door. I was by there wandering through that area some time back. And I don't remember why I had a map with various historic locations designated in that area. So yes, it does have the historic designation. It's a beautiful home. This was probably 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. I'm sure it still looks just as good though.
Thank you, Judith.
Right by the suspension bridge.
Oh,
Exactly. It's that section of Bankers Hill, kind of towards downtown, that you don't really transit. You go there rather than go through there.
Yeah.
And it can be a little confusing because of the cul-de-sac streets and stuff, but that's what makes it such fun to walk.
Nice. Thank you.
Nancy, did
Yes.
the Brandeis place get the historic designation?
The Brandishis?
Yeah, Brandishi, original place, yeah.
I don't know. I don't remember ever seeing any kind of plaque or anything. I don't know if the Self-Realization Center has pursued anything like that.
Boy, that would be nice
Yeah.
to get designation.
Hmm.
anybody else have a question for Nancy? This has been wonderful, and thanks for all your time and patience answering these questions, Nancy. It was wonderful. We all learned a lot.
Thank you very much.
Thank
It was
you.
my pleasure.
We
Sure.
hope to see you in person someday.
Yeah.
If you know anyone on the Balboa Park committee, tell them that we need to have that San Jose Hesper Palm area named after Sessions in Brandishi.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
It's
I
going to be
will mention that to Vicki Granowitz,
great.
and Vicki hopefully will bring it up at the Balboa Park Committee. You have
Well, it
on
may
an
be
agenda.
calendared. They're trying to get it calendared for their next meeting, but we're told that the agenda is pretty packed, so it's not an emergency item. So I'm not sure it's going to make it onto the next agenda, but it should at least be the next 2 or so.
Oh,
Great.
good. So it is, they already are going to take it up for consideration.
Yes, it's just a matter of when it'll come up on the agenda.
Right, great. Oh, thank you. Well, I will still mention it to Vicki Granowitz and urge her to support it.
Great.
I'm sure she will.
Yeah.
Very good.
Okay.
All right, well, hey, thanks everybody for showing up this evening. We're very happy to have you all with us. Thank you again, Nancy. It was a wonderful program. And we hope to see you folks again next month.
Bye.
Cheers.